You can all come tonight and continue to find virtual connection in this unprecedented time. Together, while coping with COVID, we are taking this opportunity to learn more about ocean conservation. Isn't that fantastic, right? Turning kind of a tough situation into a learning moment. Today, we host our second speaker in the 2020 Healthy Ocean, Healthy Community Speaker Series, an initiative presented by the Gibsons Marine Education Society, which operates the Nicholas Sonntag Marine Education Center inside the Gibsons Public Market. Please visit our community aquarium if you haven't already had the chance. We're hosting free days in partnership with the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation from December 18th to 23rd. So those 6 days in a row, they're all free for you to come down and enjoy the center. You can find out all the details on our webpage. I'll put that in the link later, including pre-registration for COVID safety. It's a nice place to come and get a little bit of a mental health break for your family and have guided tours with interpreters. It's a great experience. Our society's vision is to support an educated community that actively cares for the ocean's health. We accomplished our vision by engaging in conservation efforts, such as the Healthy Harbor partnership we have with the town of Gibsons, delivering K-12 education programs on the Sunshine Coast in partnership with DFO and SD46, the local school district, and bringing community programs to you like this expert speaker series tonight. So I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, Victoria, and she's going to lead us through some land acknowledgement.
Great, thank you, Graham. Missed that slide there, sorry. Okay, great. So the Nicholas Sonntag Marine Education Center acknowledges with respect that our work takes place on the unceded territories of the Squamish peoples, whose connection to these lands continue to this day. As this is a virtual event and everyone is joining us from kind of all over, I wanted to take this moment to encourage all of you to do some research and find out whose territories you're currently occupying. Graham is going to put some resources in the chat. This is a great website, nativeland.ca. If you aren't sure whose territories you're currently living on or working on, be sure to check that out. Additionally, if you're from this area, there's a few links there about the Squamish Nation. It's a really important step, especially within this field, to connect and do our own personal work to understand and respect these traditional peoples. So we also have some Zoom etiquette. It's pretty basic, but just a quick rundown. Please mute yourself so that others can hear clearly. Additionally, we're asking that you turn your camera off. We are recording today, so just make sure you can turn it off so we can focus on the speaker. And then if you have any questions, type them into the chat. And after Aroha is done her talk, we'll have 15 minutes set aside to answer those questions, which would be great. Additional note, we're going to be recording this, or we are recording this right now, and it should be up on the NESMEC YouTube channel and website within the next few days. So if you miss it, or if you want to send it to your friends, that's a good option. Okay, great. I will pass it back over to Graham to introduce our speaker.
I have to unmute myself first. Cardinal sin of Zoom. I first heard Aroha speak this September when I signed up for an OceanWise webinar, where she presented the 2020 Ocean Watch report findings. As the editor of the report, Aroha plays a critical role in the conservation and management of Howe Sound. And I think I never pronounce it properly, and this is something I need to practice, but Howe Sound, maybe Aroha can help us with that, the Squamish name. I'm lucky we've had a couple of follow-up conversations as OceanWise finds its new vision. And I am thankful for her taking the time to join us tonight. And I know we're in for a treat. If you didn't get a chance to read her bio in our prior communications, she has an incredible international conservation background. She holds a PhD in zoology from the University of Otago in New Zealand and has extensively worked with contaminants, invertebrates, seabirds, environmental health, and knowledge translation, and I'm sure many other things. It's quite a broad range of experiences, And why I bring that up is because that's what we need to understand and take action on the complex problems we face today. It also says she grew up in a small seaside village and fell in love with the ocean at a young age. I'm sure that's why I find her so engaging, because once the sea gets in your blood, you can't swim away. So without further ado, over to you, Aroha.
Thanks for that introduction, Graham. Well, I'll just start sharing my screen and jump into it, and bear with me while I do that. If somebody can just indicate to me when you can see that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that looks great.
Perfect, thanks. I just want to start by acknowledging that I am sitting on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish Nation, Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and also acknowledge the troubling and inappropriate manner in which we came to be sitting on these lands, and the historical and ongoing issues this causes for many First Nations, and that I work every day in my life to work towards reconciliation. I'm currently sitting in Vancouver. I'm normally sitting at the Vancouver Aquarium, but since COVID hit, I've been sitting at the end of my kitchen table. Tonight I get the pleasure of sitting in my bedroom, and if you hear heavy footsteps stomping around in the background, that's my daughter just running off some extra energy. I guess I should briefly introduce myself. I'm originally from New Zealand. I have a habit of talking fast, and my accent may confuse some of you. So do feel free to drop something in the chat box. I can't see the chat box, but maybe Vic or Graham or someone can let me know if there's a comment for me to slow down. I did indeed grow up in a little seaside community, and my summers were spent at the beach, in the water, running down to the beach, or coming home full of sand. It was a great way to grow up, and that definitely has led to my love for the ocean and my passion for looking after it. So this talk I'm going to give today, it's titled Healthy Oceans Begin at Home, a Community Conservation Toolbox. This is put together by the Ocean Watch team, which is myself and my two colleagues, Jen Chapman and Amber Dearden, and I wanted to acknowledge they played a big part in helping us get the big report completed. I've got at the bottom of that slide there the oceanwatch.ca website, so you can go directly there, and then you'll be able to click your way through to the Health Sound report, and there's also my email address at the bottom there if you happen to want to contact me for anything. Can't see all of my screen, so that's throwing me off a little bit. So what's Ocean Watch? We're a program that falls now within the conservation division at the Oceanwise Conservation Association. Like I mentioned, we normally sit at the Vancouver Aquarium, but that's not the case at the moment. So Ocean Watch, we take and look at sort of snapshots of the ocean and try and provide some feedback about the health of it in that moment and what can be done to improve the health. It's a really neat program that I'm very proud to be involved in, and I feel very passionate about the work that we do. So I'm going to talk about mostly just one of our reports tonight, but to give you a bit of an idea, we produce these big reports that are in the 300 to 400 page vicinity. So it's a lot of work, and it involves a lot of authors and a lot of reviewers. And so these are the first two reports that were produced. Hopefully you can see my mouse. On the left-hand side of the screen is the first edition of the Ocean Watch Health Sound report, which was released at the very start of 2017. Another report was produced, the Ocean Watch BC Coast edition, which was released midway near the end of 2018. And I came on board as the manager of Ocean Watch in March of 2019, I think it was. And my big job at that point was to put together the second edition of our Ocean Watch report, Ocean Watch Alkitsum Choknowit Health Sound edition 2020. I hope I say those names correctly. I have tried very hard to get them right, but I'm not an expert in Squamish language. The beautiful picture on the front there is compliments of Adam Taylor, who lives on Bowen Island. So these reports take, well, the Ocean Watch one, the one on the right-hand side that I've been involved with, it took us close to 18 months to put together. It was a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it involved a lot of different people. We worked together with our own scientists at OceanWise and used the data. We've got the Health Sound research team, which is, maybe if you're familiar with them, you'll see them out in the Sound, diving and carrying out various research projects. We worked and gathered data from various government scientists, such as those at DFO. We worked with a lot of our community members and citizen scientists within the Sound and with First Nations, Squamish Nation. We also looked at different websites that provided information or data. So one of the very unique things about this report is that although this information could be found by anyone out there who wants to go out and spend that time pulling it together, it's one of the very few, in fact, I'd say it's the only report I've come across, and definitely the only report I've had the pleasure of being involved in, where we haven't just relied on one source of knowledge. We have looked at a lot of different types of knowledge and incorporated that all together and presented it all together in one place. So that's one of the reasons I find that it's very unique. Another one of the, I think, excellent things about this report is that you don't need a science degree to read it. We want everybody, high school level and up, to be able to pick it up, read it, and understand it. There's no point producing something like this if you need to have got yourself a science degree before you can understand it. We use a lot of photographs in there, a lot of simplified graphics, because obviously sometimes a complex idea can be conveyed more simply and clearly through a picture. A picture says 1,000 words. And so we've managed to pull this all together, and we released this in August of this year. So that was one of the release events that Graham was referring to earlier when he said he heard me speaking earlier. So I'm just going to talk you through mostly the 2020 report and some of the amazing outcomes I've seen within the Health Sound communities since I've started in my job. Now, I did want to ask earlier, and I forgot, I wanted to ask people to put in the chat box where they're from, but to be fair, I can't actually see the chat box, so there's probably no reason. And there was at least one person there from Ontario, right? I'm guessing most people online are familiar with this area, but just in case you're not, I will run you through what we're looking at here. This is Health Sound. Down here in the corner, we've got Metro Vancouver. This is the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. What we're seeing with this grey border along the outside is the watershed. And it extends way off the page and it goes well up towards Whistler. We couldn't show it all on the one picture, on the one map here. So the brown line here is Highway 99 going through the sea to sky up towards Whistler. And this side nestles up against the Sunshine Coast. And down here, I'm sure many of you are very, very familiar with this down here piece, the town of Gibsons. So within the area, there are 10 local governing bodies, as well as Squamish First Nation. And all of those local governing bodies have their own communities to look after. They have different size communities, so they'll have a different budget, they'll have a different agenda of what they need to take care of, but all of them have an interest in understanding, a passion for looking after the marine environment, because it feeds so greatly into so many things, the recreation, the enjoyment, tourism, the economy, and in so many ways. So it can be a really big task to try and get 10 different local governments to pull together. But this is something which I've found very, very inspiring in this area, is that pretty much everyone's on the same page and trying to work together. And I find that really, really amazing. So I'm going to walk you through the framework of our report. So if you do happen to want to have a look on our website, oceanwatch.ca, you'll know where to start and what part you might be interested in. We do also produce it in hard copy. They're a little bit limited edition, and we haven't actually had the pleasure of seeing people in person to give them out. So there's been a lot of me running back and forth to Canada Post shops. So what we have here, we arrange our reports into these 7 themes, starting with climate change and oceanography, species and habitats, seafood, clean water, coastal development and livelihoods, sense of place and well-being, and governance and stewardship. Now, all of these together make up community and ecosystem health. You'll also notice, you can't really miss it, this big red ring around the outside with climate change in it. And we did this very deliberately. It's touching on every single one of those themes. We changed this graphic a little bit for our 2020 report by adding this ring of climate change and changing around the order of some of these themes. And one of the key reasons for doing that was that we wanted to bring climate change really to the forefront. It's a global issue. It's impacting everyone and everything. And even though sometimes we may feel removed from it, it is having impacts, even if it's not glaringly obvious in your face. But I also think when you live near the water the way we do throughout the Sound, it's more obvious. You see those storms coming through, you see a little bit more shoreline erosion, you maybe see changes in species that are occurring. And a lot of this can be attributed to climate change as well as other human activities. So within the report, we have in total 34 articles nestled under these different themes. And 29 of those articles were updates from the 2017 report, and 6 of them were new articles, and half of those new articles fell into the climate change and oceanography section. We really spent a lot of time and put a lot of focus on this because it's so important to everything else here. So our article structure, most of our articles follow this structure. We start with what's happening. So if you pick up, open up one of the articles and it's about sea stars, for example, or whales, what's happening? What's the current status? So what do you need to know? The underlined sections here are new and what we've added for 2020. And again, because of this climate change lens we were applying, we added what are the potential impacts of climate change on whatever the topic happened to be, whether it was outdoor learning or sea stars or eelgrass. And we also asked what had been done since 2017. Because in our first report, there were recommended actions and an action plan, and we wanted to revisit those and see what had happened and what had advanced, what hadn't advanced, and see what else needed to be done. What can you do is where you'll find the recommended actions that you can take as an individual or an organisation, and also for governments. We added a methods section as well, and then there's the resources and references. The resources section, if you're particularly interested in a topic, the resources section isn't in all of the articles, but for some of the articles, there are additional resources you can go and read. So for example, about climate change, obviously we couldn't cover everything about climate change in one article. So there's a lot of resources provided there. If there's a particular point of interest, you can probably find some more information by having a look there. So for the next few slides, I've used the example of plankton. Plankton form the base of the food web within Health Sound. So if there's something going on at the base of the food web, that's going to echo up through those different levels in the food web. So I'm going to start off by talking about the what has been done since 2017. As I mentioned, this was a new section for the 2020 report. And we wanted to go back and see, okay, well, what was recommended to be done and what has actually happened? With the individual actions, that was a little bit hard to tell what had been done because we can't go and check up on individual people. But at the government level, we managed to get a bit more information. So one of the actions, to give you an example, was to conduct a survey using the same stations as was used in the 1970s, examining the various different physical, chemical, nutrients within the Sound and what the dominant species of phytoplankton and zooplankton and primary productivity were. And the really cool outcome is that this work is actually being undertaken, I want to say now or maybe next year. I think it got delayed a little bit because of COVID. But this pilot study is going to be carried out by Bridget Johns, who's working within the Marine Reference Guide, which I'll speak to later. So we had on this side, you know, what was recommended and what had been taken, what actions had been taken. And this also helped us to build the next part, what can you do? If any of those actions hadn't been addressed or hadn't been addressed satisfactorily after the 2017 report was released, we kept them in for the 2020 report. So for example, keep an eye out for unusual blooms and ask why they are there, what they are, and why they're occurring. Because that's an individual action, that's the sort of thing that was really hard for us to track. But at the government level, make baseline inventory and regular monitoring of plankton a requirement for coastal development projects. And you'll also see down here this little dark box saying new. And in some cases, there were new actions that we wanted to recommend because our knowledge had grown since that first report. And so we could see there was a different knowledge gap that needed to be filled, or there was just, we could see a different way for things to be moved along. In terms of the methods, there were no methods given in the 2017 report, and a couple of reasons I decided we needed to have methods. Number one, it made my job really hard to update the 2017 report without having some sort of trail or way to track back what had been done the first time. And I wanted to make sure that in subsequent years, when we hopefully get to update this report, that whether it's myself or someone else, hopefully it's me, when we're updating this the next time, we can look back and say, okay, well, we got the data from this website, we spoke to these people, and we examined A, B, and C, and then we can go back and we can check that again. And that's going to help us to keep some consistency. The other reason I wanted to add methods was because I'm pretty sure there's some very curious, smart people out there in the Sound who are probably wondering, okay, well, you've given us this information, but how can we verify it? Where did the data come from? Who collected it? How was it collected? What did you do with the data? How did you distill that information down into what you presented? So it helped to increase transparency, and it allows people to go back and have a look. It's not something that would necessarily stand up to strict scientific peer review, but it definitely gives enough information there to go and find out where the data has come from. Another really cool piece of our report, which I really like, is the Ocean Watch rating legend. Every article where it was appropriate was given one of these rating legends: healthy, caution, critical, or limited, not rated. And we used a pretty simple system, a traffic light system. Green is healthy, according to the available data. The trend is positive, there's some data available, and actions are being taken to address or mitigate what's underway. The yellow-orange one is caution. Yeah, it's a little bit contradictory or inconclusive. We need to take more actions to move things forward into a healthy status. And then we have critical. So the impacts of the issues are high risk, or they've resulted in low or vulnerable status. The improvements are uncertain or unsure, or they're not happening at all. The actions to address the issues are either vague, or they're not very effective, or they don't exist. And then the limited data or not rated, in some places, the article, it wasn't appropriate to give it a rating because of the topic it was on. What else did I want to say about this one? Not sure. Next slide. So our 2020 Ocean Watch report, I'm showing here all of the articles where the rating increased. So you can see the theme at the top. So within 4 themes, we have, I think it's a quick scan there, 10 articles with a health rating improved in the last 3 years, which I think is pretty phenomenal, because on a biological scale, 3 years is a pretty short time span. So you can see, I'm hoping you can see, I can tell even on my screen this is a bit blurry, so this is why I'm circling it and saying it out loud. This column is for 2017. What was the health rating in 2017? And what was the health rating in 2020? So you'll look at this and you're like, well, that hasn't really changed. Actually, what changed here for the Squamish flood planning article was it now has an upward arrow. Oh, I don't know what I did there. Sorry. There we go. It has an upward arrow. And that upward arrow indicates a couple of things. One, some or many of those actions have been addressed. And 2, we can see that things are moving in the right direction, but we can't yet bump it up to the next category. The other piece of this is that there's a rationale here for why it's been given this rating. In 2020, I got together a group of wonderful people. Some of them were scientists at Oceanwise who work in the Sound. Some of them were fabulous, generous members of the Health Sound community who gave freely of their time to come and meet. And what we did was we had between 3 and 4 people read each article that we had going out for the 2020 report. And they, after reading it, then had to assign these health ratings according to what was presented in the article. That was a little bit hard in some places. There's people with, you know, decades of knowledge behind them, and they were drawing on some of that knowledge as well, but we had to really be strict and stick to what was in the articles, and as well as providing what they thought the health rating should be. They also had to provide a rationale. And then the 3 or 4 people together who'd read each article, they had to, not everybody's health ratings matched. And so they had to sit there and talk through it until they reached a consensus. So that might have meant that someone rated it healthy, someone else had it as caution, and someone else had it as critical because they'd sort of looked at it with a different lens. So they had to meet in the middle. The other reason I wanted to do it this way, it gave a chance to get some feedback on some of these articles. There's nothing better than having people who live in the community see the articles before they've gone to print and say, hey, you're missing something here, because, you know, sometimes you can't see the woods for the trees. And to be fair, I only started working on this just under 2 years ago. So that's nothing compared to the knowledge a lot of people hold. And the other reason I wanted to do this was to increase the transparency of how we put the report together and the ownership. I mean, for me, I feel this is very much a community-owned report and community-driven. You know, the community wants to see it now. There's no point making a report that's going to sit on a shelf and not help anybody. And I feel this report, these reports we do, they're picked up and they're used. And that's that makes me very proud of the work we do. And part of that is making sure that the people who are going to use it feel some sense of ownership. This is their report. This is a community report. This is not my report or an Ocean Watch report. This is the community's reports. Obviously, if you only had 10 out of 34 articles that improved in the health rating, that meant we had some that didn't improve. So a lot of them stayed the same. And I think we had 2 that regressed because the actions were either not taken or completely opposite action had been taken. And we had, as I said, 6 articles that were new for the 2020 report. Half of them were in the climate change and oceanography section. And off the top of my head, I think they all had some sort of caution or critical, just given the size of the issue it is that's being dealt with. So once we'd pulled together the whole report, we'd collected in all these articles, we'd worked closely with the authors, we'd back and forth with them, we'd got the scientists who'd written their very sciencey piece to agree to let us translate it into something everyone else can understand. Once we'd done that and we'd looked at the recommended actions for the different articles, we're like, well, you know, we have to put together the key issues. What are the main things impeding the movement towards a healthy rating for all of these articles? You know, what we want is to see green healthy ratings for every single article. So as we went through, myself and my 2 teammates, Jen and Amber, we were noticing that there was a lot of cross-cutting themes. We were seeing the same sort of things popping up from the articles, from the recommended actions in particular. A lot of the same issues were popping up. There's not enough funding, or more research needs to be done. There's no baseline monitoring, this sort of thing. And also in the middle of 2019, I held a workshop at OceanWise, focusing on climate change within Howe Sound, actually, focusing on the marine environment there and the impact of climate change. And one of the exercises we did, we identified key issues impeding the movement towards a healthy environment there, healthy marine environment, and we prioritized them. And something I thought was very fortuitous maybe, but also very nice, was that the key issues we were seeing coming through the report actually lined up really quite well with the key issues that had been identified by the people who were invited to the report. So I felt that we were really on track with what we were doing. Obviously, you can all read, there's 7 key issues ranging from research through to greenhouse gas emissions. If you want to dive deeper into what each of these key issues are, because, you know, there's more to it than just a heading, I invite you to go to our website. Again, it's oceanwatch.ca, and you can just download and click right at the bottom of the first page. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see some blue buttons. Click and download the executive summary. I suggest downloading that one because it's going to be a lot faster for your computer than downloading the full report, although the full report's also available there. And inside the executive summary, there's an explanation of each of these key issues. Once we'd identified the key issues, it's like, okay, we need to put together an action plan. How are we going to address these key issues and get some forward movement going so we can start seeing more green, healthy ratings next time? So there are actually, obviously, 7 actions. I've only shown 2 of them here because my page is only so big. So the first one, action 1 in our action plan, increase knowledge of the local area and species throughout research. And that pops open to give 5 sub-bullet points there, such as conduct baseline studies and ongoing monitoring, addressing key knowledge gaps, improving availability and sharing of data, and increasing participation and engagement of First Nations knowledge holders. The second one there, protect and restore marine species, habitats and ecosystem services. And again, that pops open and shows 4 different actions or sub-actions. Create and implement a coordinated strategy for managing growth sustainably, and so on and so forth. So each of those 7 actions, which you saw the headings for before, they have between 4 and 5 of these sub-bullets within them. And these are delivered to local governments, and it's a really nice distilled way that all of this information is put together and distilled down into here's what you need to do to improve the health of the local marine environment. So it's been very gratifying to see that the local governments are really keen for these and pick them up and want to use them. So this is the action plan from 2017. And the reason I have this here is because the next presentation that you'll hear, I believe, in early January is going to be from Fiona Beattie. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn and that we have got it ordered that way, but I believe we have. And I just wanted to point out some of the amazing work that had already come out of the 2017 report. So the first action from the 2017 report was to create a marine guide that brings together information about the area. And you can also see, you know, we've got protect and restore marine species. So some of these actions are a running theme that continue to be there. Education, for example, the management, monitoring and enforcement. But I just wanted to touch on the marine guide, and Fiona will speak to this much more fully next week. Sorry, not next week, in January, I think it is. This is something that it's so encouraging to see that a plan that was recommended from these reports is not just being picked up, read and put down, it's being picked up and it's being carried. And now there's a whole Alkitsum How Sound Marine Reference Guide project that's got a completion date slated for the end of 2021. I'm not going to speak too much to that because I think that work is amazing, and Fiona is going to do much more justice speaking about it. But it's there to help identify areas of significant ecological and human knowledge. There's an online interactive map where you can add the different layers so you can see what things are overlapping each other, where potential conflicts could happen, and it's really designed for planners and developers and anyone in the community who wants to increase their knowledge or understand what's going on out there before they take any steps to do anything. Okay, and I spoke about that, and then I have a whole slide on it, which I can skip over. So this has been, for me, I think, watching the communities pull together. I mean, the title of the slide says it all, community success. After the 2017 report was released, the Ocean Watch Task Force was created. Now, the Ocean Watch Task Force is a subcommittee from this amazing group of people here. This is the How Sound Community Forum, which is made up of local representatives from the 10 local governing bodies and Squamish nations, and the How Sound Community Forum was created about 20 years ago. So the Ocean Watch Task Force was created after the 2017 report was released as a subcommittee of these group of wonderful folks to help drive forward the action plan from 2017. And one of the key things that was produced out of that work was the creation of a strategic plan to help guide the local governments forward. So they're working collectively and cohesively together instead of all pulling in different directions and doing things a bit out of sync and maybe wasting resources by not knowing what others were doing. So that's been a really big step forward. Since the release of the 2020 report, well, the Ocean Watch Task Force wrapped up what they were doing into 2019, I think it was. And since the release of the 2020 report, there's now been created an Ocean Watch Action Committee, which is going to have almost the same function as the task force, the Ocean Watch Task Force. It's going to be there to drive forward the 2020 action plan out of the Ocean Watch report. So it's very, not quite sure what word I want to use, to know that some of the work that I've helped put together is going to have a real impact. We've really taken science and knowledge from different places, and we've brought it to the local governments and to people who are eager and keen and motivated and can do something with it. That's a wonderful feeling that I've been involved in helping with that. Now, some of the other amazing conservation successes out of this. Down the bottom here, we've got the How Sound Etiquette Marine Reference Guide. This is the web page, and I touched on that briefly already. I would also say that our Ocean Watch health rating system has been a conservation success. It's very simple, and we have had other places wanting to sort of replicate it, which I think is fantastic. We've got the Alkitsum How Sound Marine Conservation Map, which was a joint effort between the David Suzuki Foundation and OceanWise, and also this one here, the How Sound Biosphere Region Initiative. I did see Ruth Simons hop on earlier, so maybe later she can speak to this more fully and clearly than I can. But an application was put together and provided to the Canada's UNESCO Biosphere region, and that was approved and passed. And it's now, the application has now gone to Paris, to UNESCO at Paris, to try and get final approval, which is amazing. And a little bit of the information from the Ocean Watch reports help support that application, a huge, huge amount of work. There's also been a lot of other conservation successes. Maybe you might think of them in terms of smaller successes. Something I noticed when we were creating and putting together the reports, this Squamish flood planning article, I was astounded in a positive way to see that every single recommended action at the government level from the 2017 report, the District of Squamish had taken it and done it. I mean, that's what we want to see. So this sorts of thing, I see that as 100% success, that these recommended actions have been taken, and then you can look to what comes next. There's a lot more conservation successes that have come out of this that, because I don't have my notes in front of me, I can't think of them off the top of my head. If you're really interested, you can send me an email and I can write it down for you. Now, something I heard a lot was that the 2017 report was a great educational resource. So I wanted to take our 2020 report one step further. And I went ahead and I had an education kit made. Now, unfortunately, when I've put together the presentation, my little red circle has moved. It should be around the word resources. So if you go to oceanwatch.ca and click through to the How Sound report, the Alkitsum Choknowit How Sound report, on the top right-hand side, click on resources. And when you get there, you'll find a few different things, but included there is our education kit, which was made specifically from our most recent 2020 edition. So if you're an educator or you know educators, this is freely downloadable. It includes a unit plan, a student workbook, an educator workbook, and another piece that I now can't remember. It's aimed for grades 7 to 8. And as I said, freely downloadable. So please go ahead, make use of it, share it, and get people encouraged and excited about this beautiful area. I firmly believe that introducing these kind of topics at the elementary school level, it helps to bring up the next generation of stewards, which we need to keep caring for the environment. This is the front page of the Ocean Watch Education Kit, which was beautifully put together by our education group at OceanWise. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, this is nice and good, and I don't work in the government, and I don't know how to sort of push things ahead. Well, somebody forgot to tell this little girl that. And I think Greta is now probably a household name for the school strikes for climate that she championed. And look at how much momentum and movement. One voice became many voices. And I think that's been one of the key reasons for we've seen so much success within the Sound, is that we haven't just had people pulling in different directions. And I'm not saying we as in me, because it's been the communities themselves as well. They've pulled together, and instead of having disparate voices, they've started working together and speaking together, and now this one voice has become much, much louder and really magnified the work that needs to be done and the work that is being done. So that's the end of my presentation. I just wanted to thank our two major sponsors there, the Sitka Foundation and the North Family Foundation. And you'll see at the bottom there again my email address if you wanted to contact me, if there's something you don't want to ask online here, if you're interested about something else. Maybe you're interested about some of the little small reports we do. Have a dig around on our website, oceanwatch.ca. We do some little spotlight reports which are more around the 20 to 25 page length, and they sort of focus on very topical, hot issues at the moment. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Aroha Miller. That was amazing. I will share my screen again here. I just want to say thank you for sharing your expertise and passion with us. On behalf of the Nicholas Sonntag Marine Education Center, we would like to gift you and your family an annual pass to our Marine Education Center. And you're welcome to share this with your friends on the coast, people who live here as well, as we would love for you all to come in. That'd be amazing. And we can chat more via email about that too. And yeah, it's time for question period. So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to type your questions into the chat bar. I'm gonna open up my chats here so I can take a read at them as well. And then
I really do like that the photograph I supplied you, I'm actually wearing the same scarf tonight as well. Clearly, COVID limited my wardrobe.
That's wonderful. And we're really lucky Fiona's actually joined us today. So she got to listen to your talk as well. So if you folks have any questions, now is a great time to put them into the chat. Sorry, you can go ahead, Graham.
I was just wondering if since we have a little bit of time, and it might be a way to engage people, if we we allowed people to come off their video off, put their videos back on, and maybe they could just kind of ask. We don't have a lot of questions being put in the chat, so maybe people want to have maybe more of an organic experience. I know Aroha's got a ton of information in her mind. I have lots of questions. I mean, this report.
Something else I can do, I can actually hop onto the website and share my screen and maybe walk people through that so they're familiar with where to find things if they want. But yeah, I've dominated the evening so far, so I'll just let everyone else out there decide what they'd like to hear.
Yeah, would people be interested in hopping back on their video for a question period, or is there interest in taking a look at the website further? Okay, David has written a very large question in. Graham, do you want to read it out?
Oh, do I ever? David Marmarick from SHAT Technologies. Monitoring is valuable and also expensive. It's hard to have enough data to detect effects, and government budgets are often limited. So it feels to me like prevention of the problem is the most fail-safe way to ensure environmental quality. What are the biggest local threats to the environmental quality of Howe Sound? And I guess implied in there, and how could we prevent them?
Great question. I agree, monitoring is valuable, and monitoring is also expensive. And you do need to have very long data sets over a long time period, usually before you can see any effects. And government budgets are limited. I 100% agree with that. So what are the biggest local threats to the environmental quality of Howe Sound? Well, previously, I think everyone knows it was Britannia Mine. That's been, by and large, cleaned up pretty well in the last 20 years or so. There's also the paper and pulp mill over in Port Mellon. But again, they've changed a lot of their processes and procedures when they process and pulp the paper, which has cleaned up their processes a lot. Not to say that it's perfect, but it's definitely an improvement on what it has been. There's a lot of, for example, obviously the big one is climate change, in my opinion, and I'm only giving my opinion. Climate change is, well, we're seeing warmer waters, a bit of a change in the pH, which is the acidity of the waters. We're seeing some changes in the timing of stream flow, so spring freshet. So when all the snow melts after winter, and that comes down and it impacts the timing of the plankton blooms. And if you recall, I spoke earlier that the plankton forms the basis of the food web within the sound. So if that gets out of sync, if the species get out of sync with each other, you might start to see, and this is all supposition, you might start to see, I'm going to be a scientist, but maybe, perhaps, I'm not entirely sure, but it can all have roll-on effects. If the spring freshet moves earlier, which we are seeing, and it impacts plankton blooms, and when that happens, you may also start to see those species that rely on plankton, such as forage fish, maybe not as many of them as survive because they don't overlap properly with when their key food is there. And these are some of the sort of bigger picture things I can think of when you think of climate change. But it can also be, you can also end up with harmful algal blooms happening because the water temperatures rise so much, and that can get into shellfish, and then shellfish can become very toxic. There's also the issue, within the sound, there's a lot of protected species, protected species that the populations are not doing well, such as rockfish and lingcod. So there's some accidental, and I've heard anecdotally, maybe deliberate poaching of those species. The glass sponge reefs, which have got these marine refugia around them now, including a buffer, and there's particular types of fishing methods that aren't supposed to be used there, and you're not supposed to anchor boats anywhere near there. And some people either don't know or choose to ignore and still go out there, and I've been told there's a lot of issue with prawn traps, for example. And I'm not sure, I don't want to place blame on any one group, but I'm giving prawn traps as an example because they're heavy, solid structures, and that breaks and damages the reefs. That probably answers that question quite fully, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And we have another question from Dave Biggs. The question is, the resident orcas have been struggling to have successful births. This year we've had some success. What can we do to improve this trend?
Yeah, very good question. I'm actually going to answer this question not from the information in the How Sound report, but from the information I've gained and put together for another small report we have on our website. There's a couple of key problems with the resident orcas. You're talking about the southern resident killer whales, I assume. I'm going to talk to the southern resident killer whales. That's the ones I know about. Yes, super. One is their prey, which is largely Chinook salmon. So if that species is in decline, or the population numbers aren't as high as they used to be, then there starts to be issues. And you will have also seen, I'm sure many of you, in the popular media, I recall seeing one drone photograph of one of the southern resident killer whales a couple of years ago, and then more recently, and there was a very obvious slimming of its body, which indicated to scientists that it wasn't getting enough food. So there's the issue of food. If you don't have enough food, then reproducing is something you're not going to have the energy or the ability to do. There's also environmental contaminants, which are in their habitat, and that can have an impact through various ways, through them taking it up through the food, but also if their prey is impacted, that can feed through to the whales as well. I don't know if that's the particularly exact answer you were looking for, what can we do to help this trend improve? Things like creating salmon gardens. So when you're out there on your lawns and things, bearing in mind, I'm going to hop onto my website, hop onto the Ocean Watch website for a second and pull something up, and maybe I can share this really quickly if people just want to bear with me again. Because we have some answers to exactly these questions. So what I'm sharing here is one of our spotlight reports, and we looked specifically at pollution within the southern resident killer whale habitat. I'm going to scroll to the end, because something we always do with our Ocean Watch reports is have recommended actions, because it's one thing to talk about something going wrong, but what's really important is, instead of just saying, you know, this is doom and gloom, something's going wrong, something's not happening, it's really important to be like, actually, we can do something. And some of the things we had listed here, recycle and dispose of waste properly. And this was aimed specifically at the pollutant side of things. So learn more about the contaminants in the environment, and don't release them into the environment, for example, by washing things down the drain. Create killer whale or salmon friendly gardens, lawns and households by eliminating harmful pesticides and cleaning agents. A lot of people want a beautiful lawn and they'll fertilize it, for example, but eventually that runs off and gets back into the marine environment. So that's something else you can potentially have a look at there. I can stop sharing now. There you go. I can also drop the link to that in the chat box if that would be.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that
it's
would be great.
Link, but
perfect, and we can share that on the event page, the Facebook event page as well. Are there any more questions from anyone? Graham, did you want to ask a question?
Oh yeah, I want to ask a question. This is more of a feeling question. It's not based on science. How did you feel when you finished an 18-month-long report?
Drained. I'd sort of poured myself into it. It was a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears went into it. I set a very high standard for what I expected myself and my team to achieve, and I feel that we managed to achieve that. And yeah, I felt very proud as well of what we'd managed to achieve, especially given, you know, since March, 3 of us on my team, and when I say 3 of us on my team, one of those people was only working 50%, so 2.5 of us did this report. Especially that since the middle of March, we were all working from home. So we have not seen each other in the last 9 months. And we did all this virtually. And while I have to say I had the luxury that all my work can be done on the desktop, it really, taking away that human connection, the ability to go out to the communities and talk to people and talk to my colleagues, it did make it harder. It did make it harder. So even things like having to do virtual release events, a tiny bit of me was a bit disappointed that we had to do virtual release events. I was very pleased we could, but I had been really looking forward to being able to give out those reports. Yeah, so many emotions there. Yeah.
Well, thanks. That's the kind of answer that drives it home. Just the significance of the work for all of us in the environmental sector, and probably all the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into trying to change this social narrative to put environmental health and rights on an equal footing to social justice and economic sustainability. What was the most, like, you know, it's a common question, but what was the most surprising thing? Like, you know, something about 18 months of work, looking at metadata, bringing it all together, and you're like, well, that wasn't what I was expecting, because that's a way to engage people in the science process, is that it doesn't always tell us what we think we're going to find.
I think the most surprising thing was when we went back and looked at the health ratings. I had seen the incredible amount of effort that had been put into taking actions, the recommended actions. And I think the thing that surprised me was that, as I said, only 10 of the articles moved forward in their health rating, and all the rest were sort of standing still in the water, if you like. I mean, I am a scientist, and I do understand that in biology, things take a lot longer before you see, you might have to do something for a number of years before you can really see the impact. But just, really knowing how much effort and passion everyone in the communities have, that was kind of a surprise, and I guess also maybe a tiny little bit disappointing. And that was why somebody, when we had our committee to do the health ratings, somebody there suggested that we have upward arrows so that we're letting the communities know we see the work you're doing. You're going in the right direction. Keep going. Because nothing could be more disheartening than putting all this work in and then being like, oh, it's the same rating as it was last time. So that was probably one of the surprising things. I really thought, knowing how much work has been going on in the background, I thought we would have seen more forward movement. But, the science half of my brain is like, wow, it was only 3 years since it was done the first time. So
We also have a question from Alana. In acknowledgement of healthy communities, in an ideal world, how would you want to engage community partners, perhaps even partners who are not necessarily focused on the environment or marine health?
Oh, tough question. How would I want to engage community partners? So I guess we're talking about not just local governments, we're talking about businesses or other NGOs or other groups and things. Yeah, well, first of all, they need to know we exist. And I think that might be the people who know we exist really support what we're doing. How would we want to engage the other community partners that maybe don't know we exist? Well, we need to, maybe I need to get a marketing degree and market ourselves, but we need to get them to know about us. I think once people know what's out there, even if this is not a passion of theirs, why wouldn't you take a couple of simple steps that don't really impact your life that much, but collectively can make a really big change? That's a really good question, Alana.
Yeah, that is a good question. Dave Biggs also asked, is overfishing an issue here, or is it more about habitat and other disturbances?
So that first part of the questionnaire, is overfishing an issue here? When we looked at this, what we have for the fishing sections, we have sports fishing, which is your recreational and sport fishing, and then we have prawn and shrimp. Sorry, there's a lot of articles in there, so I am jumping back and forth, and I apologize for that. I'm just having a quick look again on the website because I want to make sure I'm not sort of saying the incorrect things. Definitely with the, it was prawn and shrimp. Definitely with the sports fishing, the people who helped put together that report, that article, they were like, yeah, there's, I don't know if overfishing is quite the right word because a lot of it is catch and release, but there's definitely many, many more people going out there into the rivers and things who are wanting to take part in sport fishing for the enjoyment, for the recreational aspects, for whatever it is that rings their bell about it. So there's definitely more pressure on the system because even if you tag and release a fish, you've caused stress to it. So you can't guarantee that tagging and releasing means that in half an hour, in a day, in a week, that fish is still alive. Maybe some sort of stress happened, or maybe it is alive and it's fine. I don't know. I'm not a fish specialist. But, you're still going into their habitat and interfering with that individual. So overfishing isn't quite the right word that I would use for the sports fishing, but there's definitely huge pressure on the sports fishing side of things. And the other article we did was the prawn and shrimp fisheries. Yeah, that one, they base the opening and closing of the prawn fisheries on what's happening out in the Salish Sea. And some of those populations are, I can't say specifically it's overfishing, but the populations are not up at levels they have been previously. And so this is why you often see closures of the fisheries or early closures, or the fishery season doesn't even open. So yeah, I can't specifically say it's overfishing. There could be other factors at play there, but they're definitely, and sometimes in the last few years, haven't been looking healthy. I can't speak to the other fish species we have there because they weren't a focus, and I don't want to talk about something that I have zero knowledge of. And I see you've got a second part of your question there as well. about the shoreline cleanup being a great community engagement idea. What positive impacts can cleanups have on the health of oceans, or is it mostly how it looks? It's more than how it looks, definitely more than how it looks. I want to tell a story that I first heard from Ruth Simons, and Ruth was on the call earlier, she probably still is, about the big winter storms that came through in the winter of 2018, 2019. And Ruth had taken a lot of photographs, gathered a lot of photographs together, and she spoke to the debris that was washing up, everything from tiny styrofoam balls, which form often the inside of jetties, and they'd been ripped apart by these storms, to your bigger pieces of wood and things. So the shoreline cleanup there, I mean, that was maybe not part of the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, which comes out of OceanWise and WWF, but that was a community effort to clean up the shorelines. Definitely it has an aesthetic value. Nobody wants to see a beach covered in trash, but also if you're removing these things, you're removing the potential for birds and fish, seals, to get entangled in them. And if they become entangled, you know, doesn't often have a good end if you can't get them disentangled. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more to it than just how it looks. And anything like plastics that get into the ocean, I mean, I think we all know that they pretty much exist forever and we can't ever seem to get rid of them, and they break down into smaller and smaller pieces, which can then get into the food web. So yeah, shoreline cleanups, I mean, we need to be looking more at systemic changes and consumer habits. You know, why are we consuming so many things that can end up on our beaches? I think in this particular region of the world, we're pretty lucky with having quite decent recycling and landfill in places, but other parts of the world, trash is not dealt with properly. So it's a bigger systemic issue. I mean, the shoreline cleanups are nice and they are helpful, but they're not going to address what the underlying issue is that's driving us to having to do those shoreline cleanups.
For sure. We have another question here from Rainer. They're asking thoughts on illegal fishing activity on the Sunshine Coast and the inability of the Department of Fisheries to properly manage it, in brackets, inadequate manpower, and then the potential use of drones for monitoring, question mark.
Yeah, enforcement is definitely a tricky one. BC has a lot of coastline, and it's very hard to have enough eyes out there. And again, it comes down to funding too. And I think there was a question earlier talking about monitoring, that there's not enough government funding, and it's sort of a similar thing with enforcement. I did hear around about the time that we were releasing our report that there had been more DFO enforcement officers seen out in the Sound. But again, it's very difficult to have eyes on the water 24 hours, 7 days a week. A potential use of drones for monitoring, yeah, that's actually a great idea. It could work, but you'd still need to have someone at the other end looking at what the drones bring in. I think another, I don't want to say better way, that's not the word, it's the first word that popped into my head and that's not what I meant. Another alternative way is to have the communities monitor what's happening on the water, because who better than the people who are sitting out there? Perhaps Fiona Beattie, I know you're on the line. Maybe you wanted to say something to that, because I know there is some work going on towards some sort of guardianship program, but I don't know enough about it to speak to it.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. An amazing talk. Thank you, Aroha. This was beautiful. Yeah, that's such a good question, and I agree with your comment about community-based monitoring. And so for those who don't know, Guardian programs are Indigenous-led initiatives to steward traditional territories, and they take different forms depending on the priorities of the nations. So as an example, on our Central Coast, there's an amalgamation of, I think, 17 nations there into the Coastal First Nations who have a Guardian program that recently received enforcement capabilities, I guess, from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to I guess, ticket people who are conducting offenses within their territory. Previously, their role was more education-based, so they would visit people who were perhaps fishing in places where they were not allowed to fish, and they would talk to them about that. But now they actually have the enforcement capacities that previously, I think, DFO conservation officers only had, which is an incredible step forward in making the Guardian programs, you know, that one step closer to full management of traditional territories. And in the Sound, we are working with the Squamish Nation right now on sort of the initial conversation about what a program like that would look like in this region. So it's really exciting to be moving towards that more community-based enforcement, because DFO has very limited capacity and often is not able to respond as needed to address the environmental concerns, I think.
Thank you, Fiona. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I knew you could answer that.
That's amazing. And thanks so much, Fiona, for stepping in and answering that question as well. I just wanted to mention that Ruth also wrote in the chat that there's more information about the UNESCO nomination at www.howsoundbri, that's BRI.org. So thanks so much for that resource. And we'll do our last question. We have a question from Errol. It's, do you have any sense of any increase or decrease of garbage in the ocean?
Errol, you're talking specifically about the Sound or oceans globally? I'd say on a global level, there's probably just more garbage being pumped out because our population continues to grow and our use of resources and our consumer habits continue to grow. And we haven't, again, addressed in the Sound. Okay, we haven't yet addressed those underlying systemic issues for why we've got so much trash. Just within the Sound, no, I don't have a good sense within the Sound. The Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, there are a number of shoreline cleanups that have been registered with the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup from within the Sound. Obviously, throughout 2020, with COVID, that's become a bit of a non-event, and they, in the last couple of months, managed to start getting people within the same bubble back out doing shoreline cleanups, but not to the same extent. So I do know that Canada as a whole, for the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, and this isn't specific to the Sound, but Canada as a whole, the amount of trash per, like kilograms of trash that were collected off the beaches, off the shorelines, 2019 compared to 2020, it plummeted. And that was a simple case of people not being able to get out there and do it and do the cleanups. Yeah, but the actual increase or decrease of garbage in the Sound, I don't have a good sense of it, no. So can't really answer, despite the fact I just talked for like a whole minute about that.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you answering everyone's questions. And Fiona also put the link to the Guardians Toolkit in the chat for everyone to take a look at. She mentioned there's a lot more information there about the program, so everyone can take a chance to do that. And I want to thank you again, Aroha. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was really my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'd like to take this moment to talk about our upcoming event, which has been alluded to a bit this evening, which is wonderful. On Wednesday, January 13th, we'll be joined by Fiona Beattie. Fiona Beattie is a passionate marine conservationist, currently pursuing a doctorate in zoology at the University of British Columbia, where she is collaborating with community, Indigenous, and government partners to understand how the Salish Sea is adapting to climate change and other anthropogenic pressures. We hope you can all join us in the new year as she gives her talk discussing the importance of mobilizing community knowledge to protect ocean health, culture, and livelihoods in Alketsim or How Sound. So that will be wonderful. We're very excited. And it seems like she's going to be elaborating on a bit of what Aroha chatted about today, which is wonderful. So we hope to see you then. I'm going to hand it back over to Graham for this one.
Well, I mean, we are a charity. And so, of course, we can say at the end of the year that if you're looking for ways to give back to your community, we can issue you a tax receipt. So don't worry, everybody. Here's the link in the chat box. Just click on that, and you can find different campaigns to support. So we appreciate your support by just showing up. Please do tell your friends about Fiona's talk upcoming in January. And Victoria is going to send us a link to the Facebook page. I mean, newsletter, sorry. You're muted, Victoria.
Sorry about that. So we want you to all keep up to date with us. I know it's hard virtually, but these wonderful speaker series events can help us stay informed and learn more about ocean health. So this page here, it looks a little busy. We have a QR code in the corner. If you have your phone out, you can open up your camera, give it a scan, and this will help you sign up to receive our newsletter if you aren't already receiving it. Additionally, you can check out our website, gibsonsmarine-ed.org, and be sure if you have social media to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more updates. And in the new year, we can hop back on this together and learn more that way. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. We really appreciate you joining us again, Aroha. This was wonderful.